Bills die. It can happen in lots of ways. Legislatures move on, they aren't important enough, or sometimes the impetus behind the bill being important goes away. For example, the importance of a bill on global warming going away because it snowed. Burn in hell, Jim Inhofe. Anyway, I want to talk about one particular dying bill in Ohio. It's a bill about increasing the minimum wage, and it's sponsored by a Republican, surprisingly enough. Yes, they have an ulterior motive. Thank you for asking. Now, I don't know if this bill, SB 256, is going to die, but I have a pretty good idea. So to fill you in on it, let's take it from the top. There's a group called One Fair Wage. They are fighting to increase the minimum wage. Thus the name One Fair Wage. There's other parts to this, like eliminating the tip credit, but for our purposes, let's just focus on their effort to increase the minimum wage in Ohio. Since Ohio is a very red state, passing an increase in the minimum wage through the legislature is a non-starter. It just won't happen. Republicans aren't going to increase the minimum wage of their own volition. It goes against their firmly held principle of money staying in the hands of business owners. If One Fair Wage wants to increase the minimum wage in Ohio, they'll have to find another avenue. Luckily, one exists. In the great state of Ohio, citizens have the ability to petition for a referendum to amend the Constitution. It's really hard to do, though. According to the Ohio Attorney General's website, a petition to amend the Constitution requires signatures in excess of 10% of the votes cast in the previous governor's election, or 415,000-ish signatures to get on the ballot. In addition, these signatures need to come from very specific places. The signatures need to come from at least 44 of Ohio's 88 counties. We are still not done with requirements. From each of those 44 counties, the number of signatures needs to equal at least 5% of the votes cast in the previous gubernatorial election in that county. So a high number of signatures, the signatures have to be geographically distributed, and geographically distributed in the right way. Honestly, it's a miracle anything gets done. Anyway, after all that gets turned in, the amendment gets put on the ballot and needs 50% plus 1 to win approval. Okay, explanation over. So, earlier this year, One Fair Wage was trying to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot to raise the minimum wage. It's hard, but they seem to be making progress towards that goal. This caused Republicans a significant amount of worry, because nothing worries Republicans like people making a living wage. So what to do? Republicans actually struck upon a novel solution. They decided to move first. Ohio Republicans introduced Senate Bill 256, which would raise the minimum wage, but in the most business-friendly way possible. One Fair Wage's proposal is to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour starting in 2026. The Republican bill would wait until 2028. There are other differences, but that's the main one. And you may think I'm stretching it by saying this bill was a direct response to One Fair Wage. That's not me, that's the sponsor of the bill, Senator Lewis Blessing III, saying it.
I'm firmly convinced that if the ballot initiative becomes, it gets on the ballot, I am very confident that it will pass. So I consider that as like the default. Meanwhile, if we were to pass something like this, which I think is a better economic package, maybe the voters say, you know what, we agree with it. It's getting the $15 hour minimum wage that we want, albeit slower. The EITC is a good benefit. Okay, we prefer this. We'll go with this. How likely is all this to play out? I don't know. But I think that's where we are in this context. And the quote that I was going to say is, necessity is the mother of invention. I know that we've had minimum wage bills in the past and haven't necessarily addressed them. But that ballot initiative is the backdrop for a lot of this.
The bill exists as a way to nerf electoral support for One Fair Wage. If One Fair Wage doesn't exist, Republicans wouldn't care one bit about minimum wage workers. Blessing tries to neaten this up by saying, actually, this is the system working. He says that legislators waiting until voters weigh in before trying to preempt them is a feature, not a bug.
What do Ohioans make of all of this? On one hand, they could view this with suspicion, particularly after the ballot fights of 2023. On the other, I think that many of them will actually be surprised and pleased. For them, the process matters less than the result. And if the General Assembly does what they want because of the threat of a ballot initiative, then that is just fine by them. They might even argue that is why the August Issue 1 ballot initiative failed, because the ability of the public to force the General Assembly's hand from time to time is a feature, not a bug, and this is the proof. I think they give the General Assembly the benefit of the doubt if we pass this legislation, which builds trust and is better for our political economy.
You may be wondering what the August Issue 1 ballot initiative in 2023 was. Republicans tried to make this type of constitutional amendment method harder. It would have done this by raising the requirement for a constitutional amendment to pass from 50% plus 1 to 60%, making it almost impossible to pass. For another, it would have required 5% of voters from all 88 of Ohio's counties to sign the petition, making it even more unlikely to happen. This ballot initiative wasn't a reformation of the process, it was raising the hurdles to obstruct the process, which was the point. So forgive me if I don't believe Senator Blessing when he praises the ballot initiative process. His party spent the last year trying to destroy it. It's been 2 months since this hearing. One Fair Wage didn't qualify for the November ballot because they didn't get enough signatures in time. I told you it was really hard. They're working to hit that mark for a November 2025 ballot initiative. Which brings me back to this bill Senator Blessing sponsored to raise the minimum wage, SB 256. The gun is no longer at his head. There is no ballot initiative to interfere with by passing this bill. So my question is, will this bill move forward? My guess is no. The bill's point was very obvious. It was meant to be a lesser evil for the employers of the state, a lower minimum wage than what One Fair Wage was pushing for. Now that the threat of One Fair Wage is gone, my assumption is that this bill will die. So is this bill going to continue on, Senator Blessing? Are you going to continue this business-friendly minimum wage increase? Or were you only doing it because there was an imminent threat of something worse happening? Now I'm being rather tough on Senator Blessing, but when he was testifying, it was a very open question whether this bill would move at all because of just general Republican opposition to increasing the minimum wage. How much opposition? Well, the preferred metaphor by one of the Republicans on the committee Blessing testified in front of involved a knife and stabbing.
So I know I had this conversation with the proponent of this bill earlier this morning, and I think I drew the analogy of that ballot initiative out there, almost using it like a boogeyman, like there's someone that's going to stab you out there, right? And then basically this bill is saying, well, someone's going to stab us. Why don't we just grab the knife and stab ourselves first? So I can't agree with running scared of ballot initiatives, because I believe the people of Ohio are smarter than that. And I believe the people of Ohio will see that this government increasing the minimum wage or having a mandated minimum wage is just not good public policy.
So no, this bill isn't going anywhere. And just to take a step outside of my partisan framework, this still seems stupid to me. One Fair Wage will eventually succeed if you do nothing. Refusing to consider this bill on the strict principle of paying poor people is bad is going to end with a much higher minimum wage in the end. Passing this bill might sap the strength from the One Fair Wage movement permanently, at least in Ohio. It shows a willingness to act on the Republicans' part and demonstrates a weakness on the Democratic side, because Republicans would be the ones that got it done. Holding that trophy aloft negates one of the key claims of the Democratic Party, being the party of labor. Because they prefer the short-term victory of continuing to pay workers as little as possible versus the long-term victory of claiming the mantle of workers' rights and keeping wages lower over a longer period of time. I wouldn't expect anything else from the Republican Party. I'm History Sock, and I'll see you at the next committee meeting.